Welcome to Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Jim Rugg.
I am Kohai Ed Piskor. I'm the dude who felt very awkward and embarrassed to be drawing X-Men Grand Design because I felt like I was dating our guest's daughter. Senpai, Chris Claremont, is joining us. At this point, there is so much good Chris Claremont stuff on YouTube. You just got to type the guy's name and you will see Chris in conversation with people far more qualified than you and I to be speaking with the man about a lot of the specifics of his biography and what went down. Conversations with Louise Simonson, conversations with our friend Karen Green from Columbia State University. She's like,
not state, just Columbia University.
Goes to show what a Pittsburgh boy knows, man. But Chris donated his archives to
Yes.
To Columbia, which is something that we may perhaps get into. But Chris,
Well, I guess that makes me technically Ivy League.
that's baller. That's baller. Our first Ivy League guy on the Kayfabe channel. Chris, we've been talking the past couple of weeks about collaboration with different cartoonists, and I wonder if you would be comfortable if we name some names of your X-Men collaborators, and maybe you could
Sure.
you could tell us what the situation was like writing scripts sort of crafted with these particular artists in mind, and maybe any anecdotes that go along with that.
Well, the cheap answer is brilliant, brilliant. It was all brilliant. They are wonderful. The stories were magnificently told. The characterizations were perfect, spot on. They are all lovely people and superb talents.
Yes, and
Quote, unquote.
and we'll get a little bit more specific, man. We're not asking for slings and arrows or anything like that. But for instance, Dave Cockrum is your first guy when you start doing Uncanny X-Men. He's the dude. He's the dude who did Giant Size X-Men. And just from what little I know about you and Dave, you at least share some interest in aviation. You know, the Sikorsky helicopter, the Blackbird jet is based on a very real aircraft. You bought an airplane with some X-Men 1 royalties. So I know that as being one of the sort of common threads between the two of you. What other examples are there?
Well, the simplest, the most basic example is without Dave, there would be no X-Men as we know them. He and Len in Giant Size 1 basically rebuilt the franchise. The advantage, the gift I had, I suppose, is that for various reasons, Len dropped the series because he started, he was editor-in-chief, and between Giant Size 1, which was a quarterly, and Giant Size 2, he moved on from there, and his exit, I guess, his exit deal was he got 4 monthly series, the 4 of the top series Marvel had. But he was a man who knew or felt he knew his limitations, and one of them was he could do 4. More than that was pushing his luck. So X-Men being a quarterly and a regular, was more than he could handle, or he felt he could handle. And since he was boss and I was deputy boss sitting right outside his office, I tackled him, metaphorically speaking, and said, I want this book. And I guess just to get him off me, he said, okay. And so my inestimable gift, good fortune, call it what you will, was essentially getting the last untouched franchise at Marvel, because coming onto the Fantastic Four, coming onto Spider-Man, coming on to any other series there, except perhaps Conan, which was Roy Thomas's turf, you were taking on characters and stories that have been around for over a decade. So no one's going to match the work that Stan and Jack did on the FF or on Thor, or pick your series, or that Stan and Steve Ditko did on Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. So you were just jumping onto an already going merry-go-round. The thing with X-Men is, with the new team, it was a brand new start. and since none of the characters were fleshed out in any way whatsoever, it was, to use the longest existing phrase, virgin territory. So from my perspective as a writer, basically I was starting at the Mississippi and heading for California, and I had no idea what was going on. I had the inestimable good fortune of being able to build the franchise as I went. And the other thing was that working with these characters, working with the artists, I was lucky enough to either get assigned to the series or tackle and drag them in, kicking and screaming. I stuck around for 17 years. And that is something no one has done before or since. And talk about good luck.
So Cockrum specifically in that first run, the scripts, would he have any input? Would you deliver?
Oh, it was a team up. No, I mean, literally it was the kind of thing where I'd sit down and say, Dave, I've got this great idea. Yeah. Double spread, a binary star going into supernova stage. We're close by it. There are two incredible alien star fleets battling it out in front, bodies flying all over the place, starships, you name it. I rambled on for about 5 minutes, and Dave's going, Week later, I had the spread, and it was brilliant. And that became the opening scene of 97, I think. Charlie's having a nightmare. No, with Dave and I, actually, there's a scene in 105 where Phoenix is battling Firelord? Galactus's new herald, or whatever his name is. And then smashing each other from one end of the metropolitan area to the other. And there's a scene where we cut down to Washington Square, and right in front of the arch were these guys. And it's me and Dave and my girlfriend and his girlfriend, except that his girlfriend got replaced. The inker wanted to be in the scene too, so he drew himself in instead, which Dave didn't appreciate, but there you go. And we're sitting there plotting the next issue. And then Phoenix drops in on us, and we have to run for our lives. But that was basically how we worked. We sat down, we thought about what we wanted to do. We came up with a concept or villains or a situation. And then I went home and blocked it out, or wrote it up, blocked it out, sent it to Dave. He had ideas. Basically, we put it together, and then I turned him loose. It was a much more fundamentally freewheeling approach to the form than exists today. Basically, because when you're working with artists, sorry, I tend to speak in volumes, but when you work with artists of a storytelling caliber of Dave, of John Byrne, of Paul Smith, of Walt Simonson, of Art Adams, you go down the list. They are brilliant storytellers. So why would you have the writer dictate to them in full scripts? I mean, that's like shooting yourself in the foot, because Frank Miller can tell a story better than 99% of the people I know, other than the ones I've worked with. Why tell him what to do? To give you a brief example, the first issue of our Wolverine miniseries was, I think, a 20-page plot for a 22-page story. Why? Because I throw in everything. Well, Wolverine's emotions are this. The setting is that, and I'll describe the setting. And this is what's happening. And Mariko's emotions are this, and the villain's emotions are that. You need all this stuff, Frank. But also, I need all this stuff as the writer. So I'm writing the plot for me as much as him. But by the time we got to the fourth issue, Frank and I got on the phone. We talked for 20 minutes. I took notes. I wrote it up. It was 2/3 of a page, sent it to him. 3 weeks later, I got the script. The art. Because when you're working with someone of that level, a storyteller, an artist, why waste the time? He knows what to do. I know what I would like him to do. I trusted him, and it works. So you adapt to every artist you work with and make sure to have a good time.
I don't want to sidetrack this direction because I like where we're going. But Chris, you mentioned, being an assistant editor at Marvel at this time. Yeah. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the Bullpen, because it's such a mythic thing as a reader. And I think maybe we don't really know what that Bullpen was like. Could you talk about the Marvel offices when you were there? What was happening? What kind of personnel were there?
Well, I worked there at sort of two fundamentally different levels of Marvel offices. The first time I worked at Marvel was when I came to them as a gopher. And this is 1969. And in those days, a gopher was literally what the acronym implies. Go for this, go for that, go for the other. A general dog's body. Now they're called interns. It's very proper. But, from Stan's, when I was talking to Stan, basically pitching the job over the phone, pitching myself for the job, he said, well, you got to understand, young man, we're a very poor company. And we can't really afford to hire anybody. And I said, well, Mr. Lee, I'm doing this for university credit. I'm not allowed to ask for money. You're hired. Which, as I keep saying, is a philosophy that Marvel has not strayed from to this day. But yeah, the idea was I'm there for the work experience, not the bucks. Eventually Stan kicked in train fare so I could commute back and forth from where I lived out on Long Island. But the Bullpen then was Roy Thomas, Herb Trimpe, Marie Severin, and Frank Giacoia. John Romita doing art corrections? Give me a break. Herb Trimpe fixing mistakes on the pages? Holy cow. From their point of view, this is it, because it's a steady staff job. Most people in those days, especially given the wage, given freelance rates, and we're talking like, I was proud to get $10 a page. That was a new starting salary. What was the top salary? 12. No, you laugh, but you got to understand, this was an age when you could rent an apartment, sort of, in New York, near Washington Square for $120 a month. Okay, think of this. We're in the middle of the Vietnam War. We're going to the moon, and Lyndon Johnson has just kicked off the Great Society. You want to know what the federal budget was?
Give us a clue.
$986 million. That's million with an M.
Right.
Or as Everett Dirksen, the Republican, the leader of Republican head of the Senate the minority leader of the Senate, because the Democrats ran everything. $1 billion here, $1 billion there. Sooner or later, you're talking real money. I think the idea that if you told them then that budgets and the deficit would be counted in the trillions of dollars, they would look at you as if you were, what the?
We can swear on this channel, man. It's not a classy affair.
Well, I'm English. There's tact. But no, this is this is 46. Well, in that period of time, it was 50 years ago, 60 years ago. Who'd have thought? Except that if you were born in 1905, you would live to see man walk on the moon. Holy shit. There were no planes. The Wright brothers had just flown. And within your lifetime, you would go from there to jets, to breaking the sound barrier, to leaping out into space, to landing on the moon, to coming back from the moon, never to go back, nobody would believe you. That's one lifetime. In one lifetime, you go back to 60, 70 years after 1492. Hey, is anybody in North America? Not really. That's the level of advancement that you reflect in real life. And when I started the X-Men, I thought, hey, I'll give them a real life. So Aurora's as old as I am. So she's 1950. What does that mean? Well, in 1977, it didn't mean jack shit. 27, woo. In 2020, it means a whole lot different. If you just accept the growth curve of the timeline. Wait, well, my joke is always because and I'm going walking way off the landscape here. When Stan and I had our meeting at Lifestorm to pitch X-Men to Jim Cameron, our thoughts were like, he was going to pitch us Catherine Bigelow as director, which, holy shit, an X-Men movie directed by Catherine Bigelow in 1990. Whoa! But that's a whole different discussion. But I'm sitting there thinking, oh God, I know the perfect woman to play Storm. Who? Angela Bassett. Yeah. And so I'm sitting there watching Black Panther and thinking, wait, they all go through Wakanda doing this. Well, that's the Wakanda sign. No, that's the letter X. Huh. So you guys are all mutants, right? And then I thought, oh, that's brilliant. So I fantasized this scene where Angela Bassett and the royal, whatever it is, are sitting and talking. And there's this incredible storm going on outside. And finally, she's just had it. And she gets up and she yanks off her hat, her headdress. And you realize, that's not gray hair. It's silver. And it's kind of glowing. Holy! And she walks outside and just tosses up her hand and goes, that's enough! And the lightning just explodes out and the storm just goes away. And then little winds come in and dry her off. And she turns around and comes back in. And you go, holy cow. Right. Storm did not have a relationship with T'Challa. She had a relationship with Dad. So wait, so T'Challa's the Black Panther? Yes. Well, who's got the storm powers? Oh, he's got a sister. See? I sit there watching these movies and I rewrite them all the time. Drives other people, drives Marv crazy. When I started rewriting his DC, Battle on Infinite Earths?
Crisis.
Crisis, battle, who cares? But that's the thing. It's like, this is just a totally incredible reality of characters and situations. How can you not play with them? And for me, I just, I kept adding more and more to my chunk of it. And the more I added, the more I wanted to add, the more complicated I made it for myself, the more fun it was.
Let's talk an offbeat one really quickly, man. Probably one of my few non-X-Men related questions, man. But you, as writer of Marvel Team Up, there was a quirky issue where the not ready for primetime players were involved in Spider-Man.
Yes.
What's the story behind that? I'm kayfabing here because I hung out at your crib and got to hear it, and I like the story, man, and I would like it on the record because it's not on any other YouTubes.
So, well, we're sitting in the office, Jim Shooter and me and a couple of other editors, and it's like trying to figure out what we wanted to do in Team Up, which would be different, which would catch the audience by surprise. It's like, well, we're going to have another hero team up with Spider-Man. Yeah, okay, whatever. After the first 10 issues, it starts to get kind of, I won't say boring, but boring is good. So we always trying to find ways to make Team Up interesting and unexpected and put Spidey in moments of reality like Red Sonja, like Mary Jane turning into Red Sonja. It's like, oh, wait, does that mean she's descended? Holy cow. Anyway, so Jim says, what do you want to do? And I was saying, it'd be really cool, because this was, after all, only SNL's second season. And it was just like really edgy and a lot of fun. Well, back in the day, 45 years ago. And I said, it'd be really incredibly stupidly cool. What? If we could team up Spidey with, I don't know, the Not Ready for Primetime Players, as they were known then. And Jim said, why don't you give him a call? What? Give him a call. Ask him. Really? Give them a call. So we got NBC's number, and SNL, Lorne's number at SNL, and called him up. Yes. Hi. This is Chris Claremont from Marvel Comics. I write a series at Marvel called Marvel Team Up, and we're having a pitch meeting, and we had this crazy idea. Wouldn't it be fun if our hero Spider-Man teamed up with the Not Ready for Primetime Players for a story? Long silence. I'm sorry. Who are you again? Chris Claremont, Marvel Comics. Long pause. We'll get back to you. Click. And you obviously know what's going through her head. Who the fuck is this? What idiot fan got a hold of our number? Why are they? Come on, be real. And so Jim says, so how'd it go? I said, I don't think they're really interested. So we keep talking. And about 5 minutes later, Jim's phone rings. And it's the front desk. It's Lorne Michaels' office. Hello. Yeah, this is Jim Shooter, editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics. Yeah, Chris Claremont. Yeah, he's sitting right across from me. Well, we had this weird idea, and we thought we'd pitch it of your guys teaming up with our guy for a special one-shot, just for the hell of it. Long story short, 6 weeks later, we had contracts. And the beauty of it was, because it was the dawn of time and nobody took any of this seriously, not us, not them, whatever. It's a one-off. It can never be reprinted unless, SNL, well, no, it actually can't, because sadly Gilda and John are dead. So we did it. I think the rule was all the proceeds would go to charity, and they did it for free. So I write the story. Bob, not Leighton, he was editor of the book, so that's why he got to draw it. He did the art, and Marie did the inks, so we could get all the faces right. Marie Severin.
Right.
And then when the book comes out, and I'm at home working, and I get a call from Shooter saying, Chris, yeah? How long will it take you? What are you doing? I'm working. How quickly can you be in the office? Why? John Belushi is going to be here in 30 minutes. I'll be there in 20. Mind you, I hadn't showered. I hadn't dressed. I was just, I made it. I walk in the office. 5 minutes later, John Belushi walks in. And it's like, we're standing there in the bullpen, and it's like, holy shit, it's John Belushi. And he's going, holy shit, it's Marvel Comics. I mean, it was impossible to tell which side of the coin was more geeked out. And so we start talking, and like, he comes over to me and puts his hand over my shoulder and said, Chris, I love the issue. It was so much fun. You did great work. And I said, oh, thank God, John, you have no idea how hard it is to write comedy. And he gives me this look like, what are you, an asshole? He just reaches over, which you can do when you're as tall as he is, pats me on the head and says, don't worry, John, we only let him out on special occasions. And then Katie, Dave Cockrum's wife, Katie, comes in, scoops up a yardstick, and immediately assumes a position. And Belushi grabs a yardstick and does the same thing. And suddenly we're in the middle of, samurai comic
Bullpen. Samurai Bullpen.
No, Samurai Bullpen, very good. And it was wonderful. It was a bit, we were just gobsmacked. And then Belushi says, "Hey, you want to come to the premiere of Animal House tonight?" "Oh, yeah, okay." Or on Thursday, actually. This is like Monday or Tuesday. And it's like, "Oh, yeah." And so I'll set it up. And like an hour later, we get a call from his office. Apparently, they'd sold out Radio City, so there were no seats. And we thought, yeah, okay, not a problem. "So would you like to come to the after party?" "Are you shitting us?" "Yeah, no problem. We'll be there." So, a half dozen Marvel Comics people, Shooter, me, we show up at the after party for the premiere. And Belushi's there. The entire cast of SNL's there. It's like, holy crap. And so we gave away pages. Gilda Radner comes over. Gave me a hug and said, this is the most fun ever. Bear in mind, I'm like, what, 29, 30 if I'm lucky. I'm sitting here basically like a teenager going, holy crap. And we get, John, a couple of years later, a magazine was doing a photo shoot at his new apartment. And there are the pages. And we thought, this is the kind of weird-ass great stuff that came out of nowhere back in the day. You try something because you can't, what the hell? The worst they can do is say no. And then they say yes, and you've got to put up. Or now that you've shut your mouth off, or shut off your mouth. But that's the kind of thing that happened back then when we were somewhat less structured.
Does Jim Shooter get a bad rap? In retrospect, you always hear about the burning of effigies of Jim Shooter and stuff, but there are basic tenets that seem to make a lot of sense to me, certainly as a young reader, man. Every comic is somebody's first comic. I think that's something that you've abided by through your whole career. Like we read X-Men 1 recently, and you still, Shooter is not there. Bob Harris is the guy.
The giant side.
But you're still, on that same track.
Well, I think that's the biggest difference, I think, between the world I was raised in and the world that exists today. And when Stan was boss, every story was a single issue. You could do two if it was really good, a two-parter. And if it was the coming of Galactus, okay, it's the FF, it's Kirby, you can go to 3 issues, but the last 5 pages have to be something different, like Johnny Storm going off to college. Because 30 pages was a huge amount of space. More importantly, back in those days, we were distributed on through news agents, on newsstands. So you never had a guarantee that they may get part 1, but will they get part 2? And no guarantee at all they'd get part 3. So you'll end up buying a multi-part issue and never find out what happens at the end, or never see the setup for the end. So the idea with Stan was that every story is a single story, and this is what Jim carried on. Every issue is somebody's first issue. And from my point, theoretically putting an intro page as page 1, this will give you the names and images of the characters, and will recap salient story from the previous issue of the previous arc. But when I'm watching a TV series on Netflix, I cut through the credits. Why? Because it's boring. I don't need it. I know who the characters are, and even if I don't, watching the credits is not a thrill. And too often I figure because this is what I do, I just turn over page 1. The problem is, if you're getting a first reader, I mean, I was reading an issue not so long ago, and I created 2/3 of the people in the book. And I'm flipping through the pages, and I'm about page 8, A, before anybody's named, and B, before I have any idea what's going on, and C, nobody uses their powers. And even when the powers are used, I have no idea what they are. So I basically put the book back and said, screw this. I have better things to do. Because I think part of it is that a lot of writers structure their work on the foundation that it will eventually become a bound issue, a bound edition. So if you establish the same thing over and over again in every issue, the reader will get, fuck this. Yeah, if you're a steady reader of the series, you know all this stuff. But if you're a kid or a grown-up walking into a store and picking it up and just trying it out for the first time, what do you do when you're lost? Why come back when you're lost? You've got to find a way to grab them. The first 3 pages, the splash page and the second 2 pages, are our equivalent of the pre-credit sequence in James Bond. I mean, the great gift those movies have to cinema storytelling is if you're going to do that kind of madcap adventure, you got to bind the audience to the hero right off the bat. If for no other reason, then you've got to explain who the new guy is playing the part. But you've got to hook. It's all about hooking the audience. That's why every TV series opens with a moment. You watch NCIS, oh my God, we found the body, wham. Then you go into the credits, and then wham, you go into the arrival of the main cast before you cut to the commercial, so that the audience can sit there and go, oh, crime drama. These are the guys. I got it. Wow, what happens next? If you don't do that, I've seen issues where the whole story is just nothing happens because other stuff has happened before in the 2 issues previous. Nothing has happened in the 2 issues that follow. The problem is, the challenge to me is, why do I want to pay $30 over the course of 5 issues for this story when if I pick it up and pay $5, I don't know who the characters are or what the hell is going on? And I think my feeling is a balance has to be struck. You can't always rest on the presumption that, hey, I love this writer. I love this artist. I want to come see, I will buy it regardless. Because if you do that, you never grow your audience. And the scary thing of the last 25 years, since the mid-90s, since the crash of the early mid-90s, is that everyone is spooked about growing the audience. They take what they can get and watch it drift away. Again, this is a generational thing. But when I started, Marvel with Roy basically canceled any book that sold. You sold 80K or 90K, you were dead. Because it wasn't worth the cost of printing. Yes, it was newsstand. So you had to print 100,000 to sell 25,000. Or in this case, 25,000 to sell 100,000 if you're lucky. But the whole point was, if it doesn't sell, you go away. And I was doing a series where, when I was doing X-Men Forever, by the time I saw the numbers on the last issues, I would have canceled it. I would have canceled it a year ago. Why? Because it's obviously not reaching an audience. So you either have to find a way to reach the audience or give up and start over again, which is, for me as the writer, is a royal pain because I had stories I wanted to tell. But the key is to reach the audience and have them coming back for more. Have them tell their friends, this is really good. So they'll come back for more and the numbers will go up. And you should, from my perspective, we should never be satisfied by selling 10 copies, because we should want to sell 15, and from 15, 20, and from 20, 50, and from 50, holy cow, 100. We are a business, and we need to find out ourselves what makes it a legitimate business. In my case, it would be like really cool characters, really cool stories, and have the reader fall in love with those characters so we can put them through hell. But you've got to find a way to increase the sales and hold on to the sales and make that love affair last. And in a lot of cases, that doesn't, I find it hard. From me being an old fart, I don't see that happening anymore, or very much anymore. And I think it's sad.
These are great points, and considering your history, I'm curious what your perspective was in the late 80s and early 90s, whenever you were really approaching huge sales numbers. Mm-hmm. Were you conscious of that phenomena at the time, and were you conscious of the speculating part of that at the time?
Well, I think the speculating part, Michael Golden and I joke that we must have signed over the last 30 years. This is where we both wish we'd kept count. It seems like we've signed more copies of Avengers Annual 20 than we remember it being printed in the first place. You can't, it's, yeah. I mean, my point about X-Men 1, and this is what this is partly what led to me and Bob Harris having the first of many disputations, which led to my leaving or being booted out the door. For want of a better phrase, apparently we proved that selling 8 million copies was A, possible, and B, almost easy. Selling 8 million on a first issue, that's a no-brainer. Sort of. The key thing, the essential thing, would be to find a way to get to issue 12 and keep either be in 7 figures or the very high 6. If we could get to issue 12 and still be selling 1 million copies, selling 900,000 copies, if we could get to a point where the speculators had gone away and we were still holding on to readers, that would be the game changer. That would be saying to the market, it's possible. And it for better or worse, it would have put Marvel in a much better position when the top artist went off to form Image, because we would then have a way of saying, yes, but look, we've got books that are doing this kind of performance. Okay, have a good time. We'll see. We'll meet you on the marketplace and see who wins. If you bond a title, well, and I'm shooting myself in the foot, because what I'm saying is we should have bonded the title to me so that I could get to 20 years and 25 years and have 2 generations of readers who've known nobody but me as a writer. Kind of like Stan. But it would put the commercial side of things at Marvel on a much more solid and comfortable footing. I mean, yeah, I'm not an idiot. I would have seriously considered moving on after 20 or 25 or 40. Depends on how many stories I had. But writers, in a lot of respects, are far more critical to the book than artists, because the writer, like it or not, is where the story starts. It's where, even if the idea comes from a synergy of writer and artist, or even if from an impression or an idea from the artist. The writer is the one who has to sit down and hammer it into 20 pages of engrossing story that will get to the end with the reader hopefully sitting on the edge of their seat and say, what the hell happens next? So you've got to find a way to strike a balance, to bond the right team together. And look, in the first, I guess, generational arc of X-Men between Dave and John Byrne and Paul Smith, I was lucky enough to have that. I mean, we got Dave coming back after John left was a gift. If Paul had stuck around for the sake of argument, 24 issues instead of 8, it boggles the mind because the sales were rocketing skyward. He not only told great stories, visually great stories, but he presented the characters in such a way that you looked at them and bam, you were in love. You know, it's just like all artists, there's a yin and a yang. The thing that made that made John Byrne so miraculous over his run, he could draw 2 friggin' books a month consistently. Salvador La Roca can do 2 books a month. Walter can do a book a month. Simonson, I mean, that's that level of dependency, of skill. Here's a story from the old days. So in the office, and that was everybody in those days had to live within 30 miles of Manhattan. Why? Because you got paid on Thursday. And what you do is you came in, you got your money, you put it in a New York bank so it would clear by the middle of next week. And then you went back to Connecticut or New Jersey or New York where you lived, and that was great. Why? Because if you got the check mailed to you in Connecticut and you put it in your Connecticut bank, it would be 2.5 weeks to clear. And nobody can afford that. So you drove in, you got your money, you took care of the money, you went out. So speed was as essential as quality. Well, in those days, there were these brothers. There was John Buscema and there was Sal Buscema. And you know, like brothers can be rivals. So one morning, Messenger shows up. He's got 5 pages from Sal Buscema. Cool, they're really good. 15 minutes later, another messenger shows up. He's got 7 pages from John Buscema. Oh, okay, that's cool. That's a day. An hour later, messenger shows up with 8 pages from Sal. 15 minutes after that, another messenger shows up with 10 pages from John. This goes on all day. Messengers are, we're just sitting here, what the fuck is going on here? Basically, the brothers were calling each other and saying, I just did 5. Fuck you, I just did 8. Fuck you, I just did 10. By the time the day was over, we had something like 30 pages plus from each of them. And yes, they were layouts, but Buscema layouts, you wouldn't believe how good they were. So the brothers were bouncing back and forth off each other, but the work got done. I can't think of anybody today who could work on that level, on that production level. Why? Because the Romitas, the Buscemas, Herb, Jack, Kirby, everyone, this was a job. If you didn't do your job, you didn't get paid. And if you didn't get paid, you don't pay the mortgage. You don't have food to put on the table. There was no fucking around. These guys were grown-ups. They came out of advertising when the industry crashed in the 50s. They went to advertising. Now they're back. You do the best you can. You do it because it's a job. There were no conventions. There was no aftermarket. There was no situation where artists draw these brilliant pages for resale, not for print, for resale. They just, you can get that kind of extraordinary value out of the Buscema pages and the Kirby pages and the Ditko pages But originally they're there for the reader. And if you hook the reader, the rest of it is all icing on the cake. It's Marvel's break-even number in those days was 100,000 copies. If you sold 100,000 copies, you were there. Well, the reality that came clear on the X-Men over the first decade was that we did 100,000 copies on the newsstand, on the fucking newsstand, which meant if we're selling 150, 200,000 direct, that's pure profit. I mean, for me as a professional at that time, I thought one of the biggest mistakes Marvel made, and it may be a totally justified action, but when they pulled out of the newsstand, as DC had, the numbers crashed. Why? Because we'd suddenly lost. I mean, we may have been the only book that sold on the newsstand, but damn, it was so nice to walk into direct sales and look at it as profit, not that we had to sell 125,000 copies to the retailers to make our nut. Yes, it's an evolution of the process. It's everything changing and growing. I mean, God knows what movies will look like this time next year. What movie houses will look like this time next year. What TV shows will look like with half the characters. I mean, can you imagine an action adventure show with everybody wearing, Covis masks? But look at it right now. All the TV series that would have wrapped up their season in January and February, they stopped. They ended at before Christmas. Why? Because nobody's shooting. Why? Because everybody's locked at home. We all have to adapt. It's just with comics, we should have found a way to adapt that enhanced the readership, because the other challenge with the other challenge with direct market stores is everybody who comes in the door wants to be there. They are already committed. But where do you get new readers? I go to conventions, and on one level it's wonderful. See, hi, this is my son. He's reading comics. I read comics. My dad read comics. Part of me is sitting there thinking, holy shit, I've been around that long. I've got 3 generations of readers. Wow, that's so cool. And yet at the same time, what about the 200 million, 300 million people in this country who aren't readers? Where do they go to get a comic by accident that they look at and think, holy shit, this is interesting. Where do I find one? Well, if you buy it at the newsstand and it's interesting, then you go find a comic book store. But unless you get that hook, and now you've got a situation where a lot of readers say, I won't buy the comics, I'll wait for the trade. Except unless you sell the comics, you won't get a trade. What do you do then? I mean, I know I'm going around on this a lot, and forgive me for it, but I guess in the old days, it was a business that we fought to win. We needed to win. We wanted to win. And nowadays it's like, it's an indulgence. It's an indulgence for Marvel Studios, for Disney. Why? Because the money's in movies. We're just the afterthought, except we're the afterthought maybe from which you get new concepts and ideas like Ms. Marvel for the movies. And we've got there should be a way to strike a balance. And I don't know. I mean, that's why I think one of the great advantages the X-Men had back in the day was 2 of our founding editors were Louise Simonson and Ann Nesenti. So it gave us, with my own predilections, the opportunity to write books that were conscious of and appealed to women as much as men, girls as much as boys. And, that doesn't seem to happen as much now. Sorry, I talk a lot.
Chris, did those editors have much in the way of story input or helping shape stories? I'm a fan of I'm a fan of both of them as writers, but from an editorial standpoint, were they somewhat collaborative in the way you would put stories together? What was their influence on you at the time?
Basically, because when you're standing there pitching a story to Wheezy, and she's sitting there going, cool, and you hear the story come out of your mouth, you know when it's shit, because you can hear it. And you know from her reaction, this isn't working. What am I doing wrong? Oh, it's interactive. And the problem is, the challenge today is, you toss in a concept, the editor reads it, it comes back with notes, you work on it. Then you write, well, in the case of the Wolverine story I'm writing now, I've written now and just sent in, I write a plot, I send it in, they'll read it, they'll give me notes, I'll fix it, send it in, and it'll go off to Salva to draw, which will be wonderful. Usually they approve the plot, you get it back, and then you have to write a full script. As I said, the challenge I have with full scripts is, I can tell a story, but Salva can tell a better story. So why not utilize the asset? If I'm working with Olivier Capel, why restrict him? I want to see what he can draw. I want to see what, when I'm working with Dave, when I was working with John, when I'm working with Paul, I want to see what ideas they have. When I'm working with Frank, I want to see what he can give me in Wolverine. And the joke on Frank was he kept designing these panels with lots of blank space because he knew I like to write. And I'd look at it and think, wow, that's brilliant designing. I don't need to say anything. The story, the visuals speak for itself. 20 years ago, 19 years ago, we were doing our 9/11 memorial. Joe, doing the 9/11 memorial, and I did this, what I thought was a wonderful page with Salva. And all the other pages, you have art, you have text, art and text. I looked at this and I thought, fuck no. I can't offer anything to this. So it's just a piece of art. And if someone came up to me at a convention and said, looked at the Salva page and looked, well, what did you have to do with this? What do you mean? Well, there are no words on it. There's 2,300 words. What? I wrote it. I don't understand. I wrote the image that was sent to Salva that he drew. All of my words are on that page. They're just there as picture. It's not about writing words that are printed on the page. It's about writing words to the artist so the artist can give you images. Sometimes the images will need words. Great. Sometimes you'll have things you want to establish that aren't quite on the words. Equally great. Sometimes, as with Frank and Wolverine, as with Salva there, you don't need the words. Contrary to popular belief, I can shut up. The last hour being notwithstanding. That's why it's collaborative. You just have to be able to get in sync with the artist and the story and know, half the time what's written, especially in a full script, you're writing stuff that's covering the story's ass in case the artist doesn't do it. But when you actually see the art, at that point in the old days, again, the story would come back to you and you could edit before it went to the editor and out. Nowadays, many times it's so chaotic and so late, the deadlines are so tight, it just comes back and goes out. And then you read it and it's like, ugh.
It becomes an exercise of show and tell, because you have to cover your ass, like you are describing what the pictures are also showing sometimes.
Yeah, because sometimes it will go to an artist who doesn't, who's depending on a translator who doesn't translate it all. It doesn't. You need to strike a balance, but that was what in the old days we could do. It drove Jack crazy because Stan would look at the imagery and just edit. And then, so what you end up with? Brilliant stories of the FF. The problem with Jack was when he went to DC and started the New Gods, every fucking issue was brilliant. But every fucking issue was full of new stuff. He squawked. You read issue 1 and wow, this art is wonderful. Who the hell are all these guys? And then issue 2, there's a whole bunch of new guys and a whole different evolution. And then issue 3, it gets worse. So what you end up by issue 10 was DC saying, I can't do this anymore, Jack. They pulled the plug. And in effect, Jack got screwed as badly by them as he felt he was by Marvel, and eventually came back to Marvel. The thing is, from DC's point of view, they spent the next 30 years living off of this stuff. And other writers enjoying it because there was so much there. You could mine it for decades and not barely scratch the surface.
You describe it as like each issue introduces new stuff, but those Fourth World books, every page, on this page, here's the boom tube. On this page, here's Bug. Like every page had some fresh stuff.
No, that from a reader's standpoint, it's extraordinary. Except as I said, your brain fries after a while. You can't follow it all. You lose track of who's who. And Stan, aside from being a wonderful writer, was a fucking brilliant editor. Because he could look at Jack's stuff and know what was the part that would grab the reader. Here comes Galactus. Oh, and everybody's mind was blown for the next 3 generations. Can you read? What are we going to do? Well, before we fight Galactus, I'm going to have a shower and a shave. Because if it's the end of the world, I want to look my best. Huh? But it worked. It told the reader, yes, he is a bit of an asshole, but he's human. It's like drawing an image from that same story where a cop and a fireman or someone else, they're looking up at Galactus and thinking, is this the end of the world? And the FF will do something, leaving aside the fact that what about the Avengers and everybody else? But, the FF will do something. I hope. They don't know, which is, it's Thor getting into a taxi cab and they're driving. You're Thor. Why are you taking a cab? Because human, when I fly over the city, people look up and see the God of Thunder and think, holy shit, something's going down. I'm scared. This is better. I won't alarm the civilian populace. And on one level, you're thinking, what a pompous dick. On the other level, got a point. It's finding a way to weave the adventure world into the real world in terms that the real world can understand. It's Spidey going, having to deal with midterms, having to pay the rent, for crying out loud. That is such a marvelous concept. Why do you have a job? I need to pay the rent. Wow. Yes, nowadays everything's changed. So what happens at the end of Spidey 2? He's sitting there dancing around the city with MJ, and suddenly every video shows a doctored image of him apparently killing what's his face? Mysterio?
Take your word for it. Didn't see it.
Oh, it's actually a good movie. The kid playing Spider-Man is perfect. The fact, it actually strikes an effective balance between him and his classmates, leaving aside the reality that they all had to vanish for 5 years just like him, so they would all still be balanced when they came back from Infinity Wars 2. Yes, I do know the movie coming. But it's grounding it in a real world, in real people, to an extent, surprisingly, that Justice League wasn't. So you're looking basically at superheroes saving the world, big deal. And for me, the relationship that meant something was Clark and Lois. Why? Because they were fucking human beings. It's a guy fighting for the woman he loves, or dying for the woman he loves, and finding, oh, I'm resurrected. What am I going to do? I'm going to hug the woman I love. I mean, I wanted like 5 more minutes of that. I wanted more time of that. The superhero stuff is boring. Sorry.
I started thinking about the John Byrne interviews where he was talking about working with you and saying stuff like, if Chris had his druthers, there would never be a fight in these comics. Like, I have to bug him to create a fight sequence for me.
Yeah, he's right, because fight sequences, issue after issue of fight sequences, your eyes start to glaze over. Why? Because what haven't you seen before in the fight sequence? Unless, of course, it's Galactus and Reed going through Johnny Storm going through the boom tube or whatever. I mean, going to Galactus's home port and getting the
ultimate
gizmo.
nullifier.
Oh, there you go. The ultimate nullifier that Reed scares him to death with, uses to scare him to death. That's fine. But I think it's grounded in the fact that Reed started the issue by shaving, having a shower, putting on some clean clothes, because if this is the end of the world, if I'm going to meet my maker today, I don't want to be ashamed of how I look.
You know what? I just got reminded of an old issue of X-Men. It was when Byrne was doing Fantastic Four. We're gonna get fanboy for a second. It's Byrne's doing Fantastic Four, and he does the sequence where Reed and the Fantastic Four they save Galactus, and there's this X-Men issue. I forget which issue, but there's one page, has nothing to do with the story in any like major way. It's Lilandra. She wakes up, she phases into like Reed Richards' bedroom or something, yeah. And it's just like you're a fucking idiot, and then phases out. Yo, that was like a diss track on a rap record, man, where Chris is talking some shit to John Byrne. And also there's a John Byrne Fantastic Four with the response track, you know, so it's like rap battles or something, man.
But think about it. You're dealing with the greatest threat to the universe. Reed takes it upon himself to fix him, but in the universe that had evolved to that point, every major series had their own alien entity to deal with. The FF had the Kree, the Avengers had the Kree. The FF had
Skrulls.
The Skrulls. So I invented, I couldn't use them, and I didn't really want to, so I invented, Lilandra. Oh yeah? The Skrull Empire is this big, and the Kree Empire is that big? Screw you guys. The Shi'ar rule a galaxy. Yeah, we're all dicks. But the point is that it's like Fearless Leader yelling at China. Everybody wants to jump up and say their piece. So I figured if Reed's going to do something like this, that means he takes responsibility for the next planet that Galactus eats. So Lilandra, since it might be one of her people, she's going to come and yell at him. Not going to like fry it. It's not like he's Phoenix and she's going to put him on trial and kill him or anything, but she is going to yell at him and say, you should not have done this. At some point, we are going to hold you responsible should the worst happen. Reed might think, what the fuck was that? Or he might go, maybe you should have thought of that.
That's awful.
And it was John has every right to counterpoint. On the other hand, he and I have a fundamental, core, irreconcilable, different perception of who the Phoenix is. And when he exemplified his perception in the Avengers, I think, where they rescue Jean.
Oh yeah, she's in like a little bubble or whatever.
Yeah. Of course, the joke is, I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with Jamaica Bay.
No,
Outside,
we
right next to
always fly into the other airport, LaGuardia, I think.
LaGuardia. Huh. Well, if it's lucky, maybe 30 feet deep, maybe 60 if it's a bad day. There's no way if a space shuttle is going to crash into Jamaica Bay, you got to figure the next 3 months is NASA pulling up all the pieces, scouring the bay for anything that looks like it came out of the shuttle. You'd think they would have noticed a glowing coffin, but that's a whole different story. But no, I had my point to Jim was, fine, they're bringing back Jean. I have no problem with that, but you don't shit on my story in the process. So, he gave me the opportunity to rewrite that sequence to make it consistent with X-Men reality. And,
And that would be those great backups in classic X-Men with John Bolton artwork.
You betcha.
Oh, I love those things, man.
Well, and he did this wonderful scene, this two-character mini episode where Jean finds herself facing off the Phoenix. Except John being John.
Bolton this time.
Bolton being Bolton. Jean looked like she was being eaten to death by radiation. I mean, by the time we get to the end of the story, she's literally skin and bones. She's been standing in the center of a nuclear blast, and she's done. And she is not dying nicely. So with John, I had the opportunity to show the reader what Jean was going through and why, when the Phoenix came, she said yes. Because I guess superhero dying is easy if it's like that. But if you watch yourself, Jean being a telepath, she had to be aware of everything that's happening. She had to feel her cells die one after another. Ugh. For her, that was probably taking a lifetime.
Those backups were freaking amazing, man. The art that Bolton would deliver to you, I mean, he would cater that art to the story, to the subject matter. The art from one issue to the next would never look the same. And I feel like once you guys started to get your rhythm, you started to play up to that. There's like a Mobius-looking story.
Oh, that wasn't me. That was John with Ann Nesenti, damn it.
Oh.
I mean, good as I am, the minute Ann walks in the room with certain writers and with certain artists, but that's it. I mean, that was why when Frank was doing Daredevil and I was doing X-Men and we were duking it out for first place, it's like looking at one looks at that other writer's work, and the first thought is, shit, should have seen that one. I got to do better. It is like a pianist and a guitar, or drummist and a pianist doing, just rapping, musical rapping. It's it's a positive rivalry. Okay, that was a good sequence. Here's mine. You want to. It's fun. It's not a war, but in that fun, you can get away with anything. You should try to get away with anything. And again, the fundamental thing for me is the reader needs to literally fall in love with the characters. The whole point of the New Mutants is that they're kids. They should always be reflected as kids. They should be looked at as kids. For me, and I say this all the time, grown-ups are boring. Why? Because all the decisions have been made in their lives. They're not on the cusp anymore. Whereas kids and bear in mind, this is the 70s, you can fuck up and get a do-over. Now they just throw you in jail for the rest of your life. But then you could learn, hopefully, from your mistakes. Ilyana, who is, I mean, this is the story that Bill and I did last December. Bill Sienkiewicz and I did last December, which is weird because it literally is like, it was like our next issue. It just took us 32 years to get around to it. But the whole point there is Ilyana has the soul of a demon. She is a monster, but she doesn't want to be. There's part of her that's still a girl, that still wants to be with her friends, that wants to, that was the whole point of, in a way, of Magneto taking over the school. Ilyana wants to yield to the dark side, doesn't want to yield to the dark side, but every part of her being wants to be there. And Magneto, she depends on Magneto, who has been in the dark side for most of his life, to hold her back. And Magneto's sitting there thinking, I didn't ask for this responsibility. This is too much. Damn you, Charlie, for doing this to me. But he's tempted to cross over just a little bit to save the world, and then he'll cross back. It's cool. I'm not a bad guy. I just do this little bitty nasty thing, and then I save the world, and then I'll come back. Except both he and Ilyana know that first step, you're done. So everybody, the other kids, are holding on to both of them with both hands, metaphorically, because if they go, the kids will try to save them, and they'll get sucked down the rabbit hole as well. So you have this ongoing internal conflict, but it's presented as from the perspective of kids, high school students, people who haven't quite crossed over to the grown-up world, who haven't made up their mind, and wham, that's what it's all about. I mean, I had stories planned for Kitty up, down, and sideways that had nothing to do with the X-Men. It had her going back to school and that's what we did in mechanics. She goes back to Chicago. She's at the University of Chicago. Things go bad because kids are fun. What do you do with grown-ups? Ooh, can I have sex with this guy? No, I'll have sex with that guy. Again, after an issue or two, after a guy or two, so what? It's like when you're a grown-up, the decisions are mostly made. And yes, if it's Aurora and you take away her powers, then she has a second chance to learn, maybe I made the right move, maybe I didn't. That I strung that out for 2 years, 3 years. But you can't do that with everyone. And it's basically a matter of generating organic foundations for conflict and then playing them off and see what happens next.
Chris, you mentioned, being aware of Frank Miller when he's doing Daredevil and another exciting creator there. Were you aware of Alan Moore when he burst onto the scene? Are you reading Swamp Thing or
certainly Captain Britain?
What were your thoughts on him as a writer and what he was bringing to comics that was new or different or made him special?
I was jealous as hell. What can I say? Alan is totally brilliant. Have you ever read one of his scripts?
A couple pages, man. They slide those pages out here and there. I want to read a complete.
Well, no. I mean, he does 8-point type, single spaced, with like 1/2-inch borders. I thought I wrote a lot, but looking at the first pages of Watchmen, it's like, just the amount of detail he goes into giving Brian, and there are X amount of cubes on the plate, and he's stacking them and moving them aside and doing this, and it's like, what the fuck? I think, in a way, this exemplifies much of the contrast that I was talking about. British, and I speak as an expat Brit, British writers tend to approach it from a script point of view. They write their story, and it is presented to the artist. And if you're dealing with Alan Davis, if you're dealing with Brian Bolland, it's brilliant. Actually, if you're dealing with fucking anybody, because it's all resting on Alan's shoulders. The thing with me, again, I grew up with an older generation of British artists, Frank Hampson, Frank Bellamy. But mostly I was, as a writer, trained by Stan. And with Stan, it was a matter of integrating with the artist and finding the best way for the artist as a storyteller to express themselves. And as a writer, I mean, for me, it has always been the writing is in the story, in the plot. That's where I do 90% of the work. The script is, in a lot of respects, grace notes. And as I said, when I'm working with Alan Davis, it's like, what do I need to tell him? Not much. If he wants me to do a full plot, I can do that. I can break it down into pages. I can break it down into panels. I can do a full script. But whatever I toss at Alan, I know he will deliver because he's that good. Same with Frank, me working with Frank. Me working with Salva, and that's taking into account the fact that, he's in Spain and his English is sometimes adventurous. It's finding the right storyteller to work with, much more than the right visual presenter, I guess, the right executor of drawing perfect figures is really gorgeous. But visually finding a way to grab the reader and run them through the next 100 panels. And as I tell people at writing seminars or at conventions, it's not just the visuals on the panel. It's the way one flows into the next that allows the reader to have imaginative fantasies about what happens in the white space between the panels, which in a lot of ways is as important as what you actually see. What you see is shorthand. What you do with your imagination is fill in the gaps. What are the borders, the gap, the white space? Those are the gaps that your imagination can embrace. And yeah, is your voice for a character different than mine? Not so. I mean, the way you say the words, the way you bring that character to life in your head, yes. Which means the character becomes personal for you in a way that might be directed by me, that might be shaped by me, but in the end, it is unique to you. Which is why I always hate it when other writers write characters that I feel bonded to, because why are they getting it wrong? Because they're different people, dickhead. They're not me. I'm arrogant enough and egocentric enough that I don't care. I want them to be my guys. I want them to sound like my kids, not, Warren Ellis's or Allen's or anyone else. But that's the reality of mainstream comics. The difference in a way between me writing the X-Men for Marvel and me writing Sovereign 7 for DC. Why? Because at the end of the run, Sovereign 7 being mine, I could take them home. When I did the 4-issue stunt in Wildcats, that was there to introduce
Huntsman,
because the original plan was I was going to be the first writer member of the consortium. and Huntsman was the guy. So this was his pilot. And at the end of the game, when it didn't work out, the point was Huntsman guest starred in Wildcats, but he was my character. So that when it didn't work out, I got to take him home. The same with Sovereign. When the deal ended, they became mine. Which means, I guess, the stories, any of the stories can never be reprinted by DC as an active part of their continuity, but unless we cut a new deal. But that's fine. That should be the way. If it had worked, DC would have established a whole new publishing relationship that you can lease your characters to a publisher and both sides can benefit. And if we'd come out when we were originally supposed to a year earlier, if we'd had 15 issues in the drawer before the crash, who knows? But that's the way of it. You want to find a way to expand the opportunities for creators and for characters and not just be locked into, well, this is the DC world, this is the Marvel world. Neither corporation has any interest, both corporations have a minimal interest in creator-owned material because they've got so much of their own stuff. They can't, they can't exploit that to the fullest extent. So why would they go out and look for original stuff, Chris, where they have to actually acknowledge the creators?
I want to just rewind maybe a minute and a half, man, when you talk about your egocentrism and other writers writing your characters, you want them to sound the way you write them, et cetera, and so forth. And my question...
actually, sorry, I'll butt in here. No, what I really want is to write it all.
Yes. So
screw the other guys. They can go play with somebody else's characters.
So that was just my preamble to ask you, man, whenever you go to a convention, does Fabian Nicieze and Scott Lobdell buy you lunch and dinner every time you bump into those dudes, man? For
crazy
for setting up such a winning opportunity. Like a lot of our YouTube channel, it revolves around the early part of the speculator boom. That's where we grow up. We're like the last bit of people who were able to get those comics at the drugstore, and the Chris Claremont X-Men comics were a constant in my life for my whole life up until about 12 years of age.
Thank you.
The cartoon comes out after you're done, and in comes those guys, and by virtue of the cartoon, let's be freaking honest, those books continue to sell really well and get crazy royalties for those dudes. You set up all of this so that these dudes could prosper, man. Tell me they get you like a steak or take you to Nobu or something there when they visit New York City Comic-Con. And if not, we'll shame them into it right now, man. And listen, we know that these are your characters. I said at the very beginning that I felt like I was dating one of your offspring when I did X-Men Grand Design. I'm the Kohai, you're the Senpai. We get that, man. So those guys don't have to sit there at the table at Nobu. They just got to order that fish that gets flown in first class.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's on one level we all knew what we were getting into back in the day. I mean, it's like nobody forced anyone to sign the checks.
Howard Chaykin described it as you guys took the king's shilling willingly.
Yeah, we did. Because when I started, the industry was about as close to terminal as you could get. I mean, I figured it'd be around, I'd do the X-Men and nobody knew. That's the thing. X-Men was a bi-monthly title. It was my chance to work with Dave. These were cool characters. If someone had said, dude, you're going to be doing this 18 years from now, and it's going to be the best-selling comic in the Western world, I would have, looked at him. I mean, when John and I split up, basically what happened was John went into Jim's office and said, he goes or I go. And John wanted the X-Men. And there's a part of me that lately has been thinking, imagine a what if Jim had given John the book. What would have happened? Well, the interesting thing was everything I created came after John left. You know, Kitty. Well, Phoenix didn't, and Kitty didn't. So, but everything else was post that. So, okay, I get the FF instead. Well, I would have agitated for Salva. The 30 issues or so of the FF I did with Salva, I loved, because the one thing I insisted on when I came back in 98 as a boss was, I don't want to go anywhere near the X-Men. You know, I'll do anything happily, just not the X-Men, not my book, not my characters anymore. I don't want to touch it. And of course, then I ended up having to ghost a couple or 3 issues of Alan Davis's, which I'll never say no to that. But what I loved was ending up on the FF with Salva, which was the most fun I've had in years. Why? Because all I had to worry about was creating cool stuff for him to draw and trying as hard as I can to live up to Stan and Jack. There's no way in hell I was going to think of it as, this is my stuff. Like, you know, when I was a young punk and used to go, Chris Claremont, author. I thought, on a comic book, you asshole? Not even close. But it was fun. I was having the most fun ever. I was so pissed when Bobby Chase gave me the boot. You know, but on the other hand, I was basically bought and paid for. I'd signed the contract, the employment contract. I knew what I was getting into. So then I get the X-Men. I'm going to do Uncanny, and Scott's going to do X-Men. And then Scott vanished. So suddenly I've got them both. And okay, I'll give it a shot. So I start creating new stuff for that. The Neo, and all sorts of interesting things, I thought. But again, it's like, I'm writing this sequence where the team is on the Starcore space station. And I thought, that's cool. They're all running around in spacesuits. Except, I don't know who was editor. The note I get is, Chris, yes, we're halfway through the first issue. Yeah. Nobody's in costume. They're in space. Why would they wear costumes on a space station? Well, they're the heroes. I'm thinking, yeah. And you can't tell them apart just by the way they look. You need them in costumes. So you end up with them wearing costumes under their spacesuits, which is really cool, except Kitty's got these 2 fucking swords behind her back. And you're wearing a spacesuit with swords? It's like, what you going to do? Reach out and phase through her spacesuit and pull the sword out? But that's just me. But I mean, the whole point was, my first issue supposed to take place 6 issues after the previous, 6 months after the previous, in comic book time, after the previous issue. So I was thinking, okay, there are changes. Nightcrawler's in seminary. Let's literally throw the audience a loop and see if they'll stick around for 3 issues to figure out what's happening. I was deliberately trying to play against traditional tropes because it's a new century, a new millennium, a new generation. Let's see if we can shake people up. Well, the one who got shook up was me 6 months later, when I got the boot. But there you go. It's finding a way to balance company needs and company realities versus what I want to do as the storyteller. But I mean, I was never more upset than I was when Warren Ellis, because he wanted to have Kitty and Pete Wisdom have shenanigans, and was told that was not possible. She's barely 16. Even in England, that's illegal. At which point, we suddenly discover that she's now in her early middle 20s. which of course, being me, made my head explode because I just spent the last 20 years of writing and 25 years of reading Stan's Marvel, where it was all connected. If you're going to age Kitty 8 years, dude, you've got to age Franklin 8 years. You've got to age everyone 8 years. Scott is now in his mid-30s. You know, it's like the minute you start doing that, either you're shattering the concept of the Marvel universe where everything is integrated and structurally kind of synergistic, or you're suddenly in the middle of the DC universe where nothing matters. You know, you can't bounce from issue to issue, from series to series, because they're not integrated. Marvel was always tried to be integrated. It was always the same basic world at the same basic time. But now if you're doing this and knocking one of the core books into left field, how's that going to work? But that's, again, me speaking as an older generation Marvel writer, and more significantly, as an older generation Marvel fan. You know, it's for better or worse, I have a vision. I have a dream. You know, I know how these things, I want these things to work. What pissed me off the most was all the stories that could have been told about her growing up, suddenly being cast away just so she could have a fuck with Pete Wisdom. Ew. You know, why not? You know, and the fact that we'll never be able to see the moment where she actually loses it. Who is it with? Pete Wisdom? Ugh. And when I came back, being an arrogant prat, I figured, I've got her in this 4-part crossover with Wolverine. I'll establish she's 16. Well, that didn't work. We got more mail saying, how could you do this? How can she be 16 here and fucking Pete Wisdom there? And at which point, you know, Bob pointed out that I'm management now and I really can't do that. So I didn't. We just forgot about it. But I said, the thing that I loved about Marvel as a reader, the thing that I enjoyed as a writer, is the fact that all the pieces fit together. That I can do in the FF's X-Men team up. Here's Kitty at early 14, dying, and here's Franklin at what, 5? 4? Yeah, 5, trying to hold on to her. Well, okay, she's got a 9-year edge on it. Bounce ahead, you know, she's 22, he's in high school, except he's Reed's kid, which means he's probably MIT grad school. But when you see the FF, he's still a kid. You know, that's why when I brought, you know, characters come in, when I brought Valeria into the FF when I was writing it, she's from, another timeline. You know, we start playing with things where, wait, how can she be Valeria Von Doom? Well, Reed as Doom marries Sue Richards. So, whoops, suddenly her timeline's coming to reality. You know, when Rachel Summers goes back, Rachel Gray goes back to the present, what's the first thing that happens? She finds out that Scott isn't married to Jean, he's married to Madeline, and they just had a boy. Holy cow. You know, except that I was oddly enough just reading this page online, and hey, this is cute. It's Scott and Madeline and the baby writing sending a postcard or something to the X-Men, showing them living in Alaska, and the baby's a baby. So they spent some time in Alaska clearly before the FF1, Gen X, no, X Factor events happened. How do you balance that out? I don't know. That's what no prizes are for. Well, sorry, I talk too much. But I mean, the whole thing is, it's a shared world, which means everybody needs to play fair with everybody. And you have to find a way to not overwhelm the shareness, but exploit it. Find a way to make it work together. Throw the readers a loop. It's never feel restricted by rules. You know, all the stuff that Frank and I did for all of our career, most of our career was under the Comics Code Authority. Okay, Comics Code is very strict, especially when it comes to sex. Okay, what are you going to do about it? Well, we have a scene where Madeline's asleep in bed. Suddenly she wakes up going, ah! In the next panel, Scott runs in from another room. Okay, so what? Well, a kid will read that and he sees Madeline wakes up, Scott runs in. We move on. Someone older will read it and think, huh, she's wearing a pajama shirt, right? That's an awfully big bed. And the bed covers next to her look awfully ruffled. And then Scott runs in wearing the bottom half of the same pajamas. Huh. What does that imply? Shenanigans. But we never say it. You never see anything. You just leave it to your imagination. Why? Because the reader's imagination is considerably more inventive and salacious than anything I can put on the page. And more importantly, the reader then becomes involved in what's going on. Not simply from the surface element of reading the events that occur right in front of them, but all of the implications that are in the background, that are presented as throwaways, as tantalizations. That's, to me, the essence of storytelling. Not just what you see in front of you, but what's behind, what your imagination can play with, where it can take you. I mean, that's what I loved about Stan and Jack and Ditko especially, you know. And if it was fun for me as a reader, why the hell can't I try and make it fun for the people who are reading my stuff? Why does everything have to be spelled out and everything front and center? It's boring.
We should begin wrapping up shortly, Ben. Jimmy,
it's only been 2 days.
Do you have a big one? Chris, in a world where COVID-19 is not happening, are you still teaching comics writing courses?
No? Only like panels at conventions.
Okay.
Which is fine. I mean, it's.
How did you like the experience? Did you do it for a solid year? 2 years?
Yeah. No, just for a term, not even a year. It's an interesting generational difference. It's I was conditioned by Stan's basic rubric, which is, I want good stories, I want them on time, I want you not to be a pain in my ass. And from Stan's perspective, any 2 out of 3, you keep your job. But he'd prefer all 3, but any 2 could do it. And it's a very fundamental rubric. And a lot of that's actually faded away a lot over time. And from my perspective, it's not a bad way to define relationships and the work industry. You know, it's got to be on time, because if it's not on time, then you're screwed. And way too much these days isn't on time. And, you know, from my perspective, I think, look, Jack did it. You know, John Buscema, John Romita, John Jr. did it. all the guys I grew up with could do it. Why can't we do it? It's too many pages. It's too hard. Bullshit.
You were getting a lot of excuses. I know I have a lot of friends in academia who teach, professors and whatnot, and they talked about within the past 10, 15 years the phenomenon of the kid's parent, this adult's parent, coming to Columbia to read you the Riot Act because you didn't give their baby an A or something.
Well, I gave all my pupils an A. Either it was either an A minus, an A, or an A plus, because it's writing. I'm not here to judge the quality of your story. I'm here to try and give you a sense of the craft. But there were some people there who told great stories but had no knowledge of craft, and some people who had a great knowledge of craft and didn't know how to tell a story. And one guy who his desperate desire was to come to work at Marvel and tell comic book stories. And, my attitude was, okay, that's nice. Don't you want to try and do more than that? And then looking at his stories, it was like, tell me something. If you want to go to work for Marvel, tell me something I haven't seen before. It's not.
Don't be political, man. Say what's on your mind.
No, I'm just trying to phrase this. It's like the X-Men had this brilliant idea that I gave Len in Giant Size of how to get rid of Krakoa. Basically, cut him off from the mountain he's sitting on and throw him into, let gravity do the rest. The Earth orbiting on its rotation and then orbiting around the sun, orbiting on its axis and then orbiting around the sun. So if you just pop him up into the atmosphere, give him 10 minutes and he's out of the atmosphere in space, it's like he's an island. What's he going to do? What's he going to hold on to? The minute he's out, give him an hour and he's out of Earth's basic gravity well, what's going to happen to the dirt? It's going to start drifting apart. Did they kill him? Yeah, but so what? And then on one level, I'm sitting there kind of going, they brought back Krakoa. What dumbasses. And then I started thinking, he's a living island. It's only been 45 years. No one's ever looked into the concept of what a living island is. Well, what is an island? It's the top of a friggin' mountain. So maybe the mountain is like the equivalent of an evil pimple on the planetary body. Mother Nature missed, this is an unpleasant part of her. Maybe it's not the island that's living, it's the whole mountain. It's just taken a long time to grow enough to poke up out of the water again. Which then started me thinking, so we've got the mountain. Maybe the mountain has learned from Giant Size number 1. I just cut the island loose from me with some means of floating by itself. Maybe someone will come live on it. Maybe as they come live on it, I can exercise my influence over them. Maybe I can seduce them. Maybe I can turn them into my puppets. Maybe I can have them resurrect themselves over and over again and steal bits of their essence to sustain me. At which point I'm sure, what's-his-face is now going to come after me with a brick. But, this is the craft of writing. You look at an idea and you think, and maybe have a better idea, or what you think is a better idea, which then makes editors want to kill you because you're not supposed to screw up somebody else's concept. And my stock reality is, oh, I'm sorry, did you not read X Factor?
Right.
But see, that's the game we all play. You look at an idea and you sit back in your chair and you think, huh, yes, it's what would I do in a similar situation? And all of us are bound by the same ego, arrogant, what I was saying before. Well, anything he can do, I can do better. But sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes you're right. I mean, years ago, when Infinite Earths came, no, that's Marvel.
Infinite Earths is DC.
Oh, that's the Crisis on Infinite Earths, right?
Yeah.
All these infinites they blur.
Right.
So there's that classic cover. I'm not sure which came first, the Infinite Earths cover or the death of, or 136 of Scott, where Scott's holding Jean. Only in this case, it's Superman holding Supergirl. And it's like, oh my God, Supergirl's dead. And the minute I saw that cover, I knew they'd made a fundamental mistake. Imagine at that point in Crisis, if it was Supergirl holding Superman. And everyone's going, holy shit. And so they go through the next 5 issues. They defeat what's-his-face. I can't even remember now. But they've won the battle. They've won the war. But they've lost the greatest battle. Superman is dead. How will we proceed? My God, it's like Justice League, not Justice League. That Superman Batman, Batsuit, the movie, which apparently is now being re-released in the Snyder cut. Oh my God. But in the last scene, someone in the shadowed background of the heroes starts moving forward. And it's this old man. And as as the panels progress and he walks through the crowd, he starts straightening up and up and up. And the costume that was bent and the cloak that was, because he's like 100 years old, starts not looking quite so old anymore around the original S. And as he comes into view, he reaches up and brushes all the whiteness out of his head. And you realize who you're looking at. And he looks at everybody and says, why are you surprised? I'm the original. I don't get old. But all my friends did. Lois did. Perry did. Jimmy did. They all died. I got old with them because I couldn't bear that they would get old and see me staying young. And after they were dead, I couldn't bear. I had to be as I was. But they're all gone now. And I'm here. At which point, the ad comes out this September from DC Comics. The one, the only, the original Superman, written and drawn by John Byrne. And I was thinking, fuck, I'd buy one of those. Because suddenly you have the original Superman with all of his 1936 limitations on Earth. He's not as invulnerable. He can't fly as much. He leaps tall buildings at a single bound. He's not quite the guy we know. He'll grow into it over the next years, but he's vulnerable. More importantly, he can't go anywhere near Lois. It hurts too much. His beloved wife, Lois, died. How can he start that all over again when he knows the end game? So he's going to stay clear of her. But it's like, if you're going to restart, go back to the beginning and restart from the core. Don't just, hi, I'm the 1987 Superman. We're off and running. Because this, I'm sorry, I would buy this just to see what take John would have on it. Because if you're going to measure yourself by what really matters, the original, the core thing. You know, if I wanted to write better than Stan, did I? I don't know, but I tried. If he's gonna present Superman, go back and present Superman, not the 80s Superman, the original Superman, the guy who, you know, whose world has died, not just Krypton, but Earth. All the infinite Earths died. He's on the only one that's left. Protecting it means everything to him because it's the only one left. To me, you want melodrama? That's melodrama. You know, I really want to see how if movies ever get made again, how they pull off Spidey. Because at the end of movie 2, Peter Parker is revealed to the entire world. What does that mean? Where can he run? What's going to happen with Aunt May? You know, he doesn't have any protectors. Tony's dead. The Avengers don't, you know, yeah, he's kind of an Avenger, but do they really know? And if he joins the Avengers, won't that mean, you know, disgrace their reputation? They have enough problems considering all the stuff that led up to Infinity Wars. It's all a matter of figuring out the core question, figuring out what would make you go out and buy the comic, and then coming up with a story that is even creepier and better that you can use to grab all the readers that are out there. And most importantly, take them by surprise. You know, it's doing something. My favorite metaphor is NCIS, because Belisario has been doing a string of hits for the last 50 years, it seems like. But, you know, I'm watching like the 3rd season, and suddenly at the end of the last episode, wham! The young, you know, the girl on the team, the ex Secret Service agent, gets shot in the head. What the fuck? You don't shoot one of the stars in the head on the last episode. You have to wait all summer for what happens next. And from there, they went on to Ziva. And Ziva lasted a bunch of years, and then something happened to her out of left field. This is melodrama. This is the key thing. You need to keep the audience on the edge of their seat and somehow, magically, find a way to surprise them. Because, and if it's a legitimate surprise, they'll be grabbed not only intellectually, wow, that's cool, but it's a hit in the gut. And that will keep them coming back to see what happens next. And that will keep them coming back to stick around to see what you're going to do a year or two down the line. Sometimes it may be a dud, but you've got to keep trying from that point of view. You've got to keep, you know, it's like at the end of the Teen Titans X-Men. How does it end? With, in a way, Darkseid getting his wish. He is now part of the gods stuck on the wall. May not be the way it is in reality, but this isn't reality. This is the Earth team up. But for me, wow. Focus on that. Rev up the John Williams score. What happens next?
Chris, how if you would have had your druthers, man, and you had this played out all the X-Men stuff that you wanted to play out, how would you have ended the series?
That was what X-Men The End was all about. You know, Kitty becomes president. Happy days are all around, except waiting in the background is Days of Future Past. So I don't think in realistic terms there is an ending.
Right.
There's a point where I decide, screw it, I can't do this anymore, or I don't want to do this anymore, or I just drop dead. Ugh. The point, you know, or Marvel gets tired of me and says, take a hike. But for better or worse, creatively speaking, comics are something I love. And Marvel was my prom date. It's just lasted a whole long time. And the X-Men, I mean, when I was a gopher, Roy and Neil were doing their run on X-Men. And they were trying, Roy was trying, they were plotting out the last of the Sentinel run, the last of the Sentinel epic. And they couldn't figure out a really cool way to deal with the Sentinels. The Sentinels had just beaten every superhero had come after them. How do we get rid of them? And being a young punk and not knowing my limitations, I just said, well, you know, scientists figure that the source of mutation is radiation. It tweaks the genes and things change, and suddenly, boop, we evolve. Likewise, the source of radiation is the primary source in our solar system is the sun. So if the Sentinels want to deal with mutants, the only way to really do it is deal with the sun. Yeah, Roy looks at Neil looks at Roy. Okay. And the next thing you get is this full-page splash, remember, of the Sentinels just diving into the sun that's so huge and magnificent it won't even fit in the page. And that's 1969. So, you know, the X-Men and I have been circling around each other from the beginning. So I guess one could say, as I lean back out of frame, fate had this game in store right from the start. So, you know, I'm just riding it, hopefully to a happy ending, hopefully not an ending for a while. Hopefully, you know, we'll see. I don't know. It's just, this is my core band, I guess.
I do want to know, what can you say about this Wolverine comic you're working on, and we'll get the heck out of here.
10 pages. I'm writing it. Salva's drawing it. It's black and white, which is convenient because it's bloody. And I can't really talk much about it because I just sent the plot in to the editor, and I haven't heard back yet. But what I can say is it's 10 pages. It's Kitty and Logan. I suppose since it's Kitty and Logan and Salva and me, it's sort of kind of maybe almost a sequel to the story we did last fall. But that was all about making ramen. This is something completely different. And if they ever do it in color, holy shit!
where are we going to find this 10-pager?
I have no idea.
Okay, well,
they're doing, I think, a Wolverine black and white, but since everything from a publishing standpoint is obviously in something of a codswallop because of the coronavirus. You know, I'm waiting for the next beer ad. No, we're the one you can drink, not the one that'll kill you.
Yeah, like that whole coronavirus thing, man. I was thinking, like in the 80s, there was a weight loss chocolate that you could get called AIDS, AIDS. Yeah. Corona's gonna have to change their name, man.
No, they'll just have to change. You know, ay, Corona, ay, Corona. See, this is where you wish SNL was still on.
You're a heck of a madman, copywriter, Chris. Well, it was a ball, man. We had a
my
ball
pleasure.
With you. 2 hours. We don't want to keep you too long, man. You got calls coming in. You got business to attend to.
Actually, I have to mop the floor.
Got to mop the floor. Listen, man. Even superheroes still have to, take care of the house chores.
Well, see, that's the thing I wondered. You know, there's this mansion. There are all these kids. Who does the shopping? I mean, what was it? I did a couple of issues where the throwaway moment is like the X-Men have to do their own dishes. You know, they have to clean up after dinner. And all I could think of was like, is this what happens between the panels? But those are, you know, sorry, this will probably take another 20 minutes. The essence here, and the thing I think gets, I mean, the moment I love, one of the moment I loved the most in Batsuit is when Clark comes in. Lois is taking a bath, and Clark comes in, and they're just bantering for a minute, and he just climbs in the bathtub. And I thought, okay, I like him. I like him. I like her. It's the relationship. You know, it's like, oh God. Okay, this is my Warner Brothers fantasy. This is where Zack Snyder will come after me with a brick. So I'm watching the opening of Batsuit, and there's Bruce Wayne landing in Metropolis as the fight is going on crazily all around them, and he's driving through the ruins of the city trying to get to Wayne Enterprises. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh man, missed the obvious bet. What's that? That Batman, Superman, especially since Ben Affleck looks that much older, it's the same continuity as the Chris Nolan films. It's just 10 years later. He's remade Wayne Fortune, has been restored. He's back online again. And who he's going to save in the Wayne Tower in Metropolis is not the people who work there, though that's part of it. It's Catwoman and the kids. Why? Because Gotham is a shithole. And he's not going to put his family at risk by putting them there. He's going to keep them in Metropolis, the safest city on the planet. Why? Because of the guy. And he gets there, and Catwoman says, yes, we'll be right down. Everything's cool. And just as he gets there, the building collapses. And he's staggered, then you play it out as it was there, except that what's happened is because of the fight between Superman and Zod, please don't bring back Zod again. He's lost the woman he loves and his children. If you want a motivation for Bruce to go totally off the edge and want to rein in Superman, bingo. And then you run through the film, and you get to the end of the film, and there's Wayne Manor, his little underground, whatever it is, and he's packing. Good night, Alfred. Gets in the car and starts driving, and you realize, gosh, Wayne Manor must be the size of, Connecticut. He's driving and driving and driving, and he comes to another, incredibly beautifully camouflaged residence. And he walks in. And who's there? Catwoman and the kids. Why? Because she's Catwoman. No Superman from another planet's going to kill her, aside from the fact she's got 9 lives. It's like, and you get to end the film on a moment of, your heart's broken because Superman's dead, but it's restored by the fact that Bruce at least has possibilities. Screws up the relationship between Bruce and Wonder Woman, I know, but who cares? But to me, as an audience, it's things like that. It's finding, maybe even she comes out for the funeral. Catwoman does. It's like to be with her guy. It's finding a way to both have your cake and eat it, in the sense that having the cake is the death of Superman. Yes, they bring him back, but eating it is showing the reader, see, we're going to catch you a little bit by surprise every way we can. You thought she was dead? She's not dead. She's not that stupid. Neither actually is Bruce. So, it's my fantasy, so it's good for me. You may think it's total dumbass, but that's what we need to do as writers. You look at the story, and as I said with Superman, with the original Superman coming to life or revealing himself, it's finding a way to catch the reader by surprise in a way that makes the reader think, I have got to see what happens next. I like these characters. I like them. I like these people, not characters. They're cool as people, not superheroes, people. Anyone can run around in a skin-tight suit, though. As you can see, well, I was watching the Defenders. Luke Cage and the quartet. And Jessica Jones keeps making accurate dumbass comments about Daredevil's outfit. I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, you're right. Even reinterpreted for practical real life, superhero costumes are dumbass. Captain America, okay. Tony, definitely okay. But for the most part, ew. But it's a matter of, it's a love affair. You want the reader to love the characters. How do you form the love affair? By making them accessible, identifiable, people, not icons, the moments I loved, again, were Clark and Lois relating as Clark and Lois, not Superman and Lois. It's finding ways that Batman, that Bruce, what's your superpower? I'm rich. Okay, big deal. I mean, Flash was more identifiable as a hero, as a person than Bruce was. I mean, aside from the fact he's building a giant transport plane all by himself. We're supposed to drop off the giant transport at this mysterious place in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. So what? Well, you sure that isn't where Batman lives? It's just, ugh. And I am ranting. I am going extreme, but I'm not interested in, I've never been interested in Batman. I've always been interested in Bruce. The same with Superman. I like Superman, but Clark's more fun. The relationship is more fun. It's like when I was doing the FF, Reed's job is, because the Baxter Building is not available, they're living on Pier 7, which conveniently is right next to Stuyvesant High School, where Reed coincidentally teaches college prep science and maths. Why? Because it's real world stuff. It allows you to integrate the characters into the world of New York that anyone around New York will recognize, and hopefully, oh, I've done that. I've been there. That's so cool. Reed Richards could teach my science class? Holy cow. And basic thing, doorbell rings. It's two reporters from NPR TV coming to interview Sue. No one told Sue. So she answers the door dressed in, a robe and nightgown. All you need is to open the door and find yourself staring at a camera with two reporters who were there for an interview. How cool, But it's something that a lot of people in the real world either know about personally or know about from seeing it happen on CNN or Fox. So they can relate. That's the point. Finding points of contact between the characters in the book and the readers reading the book. And if you can do that, then you've got the readers coming back for far more legitimate reasons than just watching superheroes punch each other in the face, and will want to be a part of that world. Because if the superheroes can be a part of my world, hey, maybe I can cross the other way, even in my imagination. because it worked with me, got me hooked. So I want to hook them.
Chris, man, you've been very generous with your time today, sharing your philosophies, sharing your story ideas. I do want to say, though, man, Scott Lobdell, Fabian Icieze, don't steal that Superman idea that Chris laid out here, man. And take the man to Nobu next time you're at New York Comic Con, goddammit. This guy made your life.
I appreciate that, but, you know, that's the advantage of being under contract. All I can do is pitch DC ideas. I can't do them.
We'll leave it at that, though, Chris. Thanks a lot for your time, man.
My pleasure. I'm sorry for boring you.
Who's bored?
Once I get started, I just can't stop.
We love it.
Chris, is there somewhere that people should follow you? Or are you active on any social media that you want to give out?
I'm on Instagram. You know, I'm only about 1.736 million viewers behind Sophie Turner. I'm gradually building up.
What's your Instagram handle?
Good question. I think it's chrisclaremont.com.
We'll find it and put the link in the description. But you know, you may be
and I also I'm also on Facebook, though I don't go there very often because my head explodes. The only challenge with Instagram is I need to take pictures, and I'm not good at that.
Yeah, most people on Instagram are not good at that.
Yeah, but I like to increase my following.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, and also there's chrisclaremont.com.
Great. We'll put all those links in the description for sure.
Okay.
Chris, stay well, stay healthy, keep the hatches battened down, or however that phrase goes, man. And thanks a lot.
Do my best. You're more than welcome. Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
And putting up with me for 2.5 hours.
Our pleasure, man.